always sort of, and I don't know if that's because I came from, I came from an academic background and was supposed to be this researcher, and the things that I was most jazzed about doing was doing public engagement, and so I was always kind of like, does this really count? Like, does this affect the way I would be evaluated as doing my job? And is this going to help me for whatever the next job I'm going to have? Is it going to help? Even though it was the things that I loved doing the most and thought were the most meaningful, of getting some of these ideas out of the academy or out of my brain into a public space and seeing what happens with them there. So I think one of the things I most admired and appreciated about being at CHF was that there were these opportunities to do public engagement, but I wasn't sure how much they were valued by upper management. I mean, not, especially like what did the new president who is making these changes, and there's this new process that was happening as to what the institution was going to value and what it was going to be about. I mean, what was it called, the strategic plan or something?
Yeah.
All that sort of stuff was sort of in the works and sort of in flux, and so there was, in my mind, like, is the public engagement piece something that is valued as being a meaningful part of what this institution does and is about?
Yeah.
Even though there's components where there to make them possible, I had the feeling that it was getting less. There was less import put on it, and I don't know if that's a valid feeling, accurate, but that was what I remember thinking.
Yeah, and so that's something that you started to get a sense for, like, over time in working here?
I think so, yeah. I mean, it was all these sort of things that I was like, man, this is awesome, I love doing this, but the public engagement pieces, I mean, but is this something that the institution thinks matters?
Yeah.
And is it going to help me once my time at the institution ends?
Yeah.
And in a weird way, it did. I mean, if I can talk a little bit about importance in that way, that the irony of that I was put in this oral history center at CHF, and then learned how to do it, and then had these great opportunities, these incredible opportunities to do oral histories with these remarkable people. That then enabled me to get the job that I have now. I mean, it was all not something I had planned. Almost feels like I fell backwards into it. And the public, but I also will say that the part of the reason why I was hired at the position I'm in now was in part because they were like, oh, you're interested in and do public engagement, and we would like to have that be a part of what we do here at Berkeley, at the Oral History Center at Berkeley. And so the fact that I did Twitter engagement and that I had ideas about how to bring oral history and the research that we were doing and the conversations we were having and recording for the archive here into a public space and have that be a part of projects and something that we could then bring to donors and say, we're not just going to record an oral history and have it be stored on the Bancroft forever. We're also going to have these public engagement pieces that bring our stories out. And the podcast work that I did a little bit at CHF, all of those sort of things made me an attractive candidate for the position I have now at Berkeley.
Yeah.
So in a way that I was paranoid about this matter within CHF, it certainly mattered to get me in the doors for the job I have now.
Yeah, cool. Other than in your job application to Berkeley, have you shared your work on public-facing projects with other academics, like others in the academic world?
I have not yet, but will. So the Oral History Association meeting in Montreal in a couple of weeks, in mid-October, I will present on the fictions on the Philadelphia Energy Project, the Energy Futures Project, the Oral History Project I did. And part of my presentation on that will say, not only here's what we talked about, and here's the issues and the questions that came out of it for me, from an oral history research point of view, of like how do we talk about histories and when we're doing, how do we talk about the future when we're doing oral histories? But I'll also talk about the public engagement piece that we did with things from the adaptation of things from the future. So that's going to be the first time I'll present in an academic sense the public engagement pieces that were a part of that work.
Have you just kind of casually had discussions with people in academia about public engagement work you've done outside of, this formal presentation coming up?
Say that again?
Have you, aside from this presentation coming up, do you ever speak, informally about your experiences with public engagement to other academics?
Totally. Yeah, other people that work in the Center for Oral History Center here at Berkeley, we are thinking in terms of project planning. Mm. So, for example, there's a project we're thinking about that involves Superfund sites and doing kind of almost like what Ambler, like an Ambler approach, but have it be around Superfund sites. Like, what was the community experience, and what were different people at the managerial level and at a corporate business level that want to invest in these Superfund sites, and what about people that lived in these sites? Mm-hmm. So sort of doing an oral history project around that, but then to certainly have a public engagement piece that becomes part of that. And I think that public engagement piece is how we'll be able to make donors and financial partnerships want to be invested in the oral history work. Mm-hmm. That it's not just going to be, we'll record this and save it, but we're also going to take the process of doing the oral histories, and then the oral histories themselves will be shared in a way that it would include podcasts and will include actual public events. Mm-hmm. So that's worth, my colleagues and I, in thinking about the future work we're going to do together, we're thinking about public engagement pieces as a big part of it.
Yeah. You kind of touched on this too, but what would you say facilitates or hinders you doing public engagement?
Part of it is approval from the powers that be. I have bosses here, and I had people that I felt were evaluating my work in Philly, and was public engagement something that was encouraged? Mm. Was it something that was valued, or is this just something I was doing for the hell of it because I liked it? And that shapes whether you're going to put time in, and whether you're also going to have institutional resources put in to help make it possible.
Do you ever hear anything about ways it's valued or not? Like anything specifically that people say, in whatever context about why to do or to not do public engagement?
I've heard things with other colleagues within the Institute, within CHF, that have talked about why it matters, why they think it matters. Mm. And part of being a good citizen, being downtown Philadelphia and being in such a diverse and eclectic city, and the role that the Institute can play as that public engagement plays in building a presence for the Institute and giving it purpose, and also having it being a meaningful community partner. That was certainly a part of the dialogue that was there. I've also heard people just talk generally that aren't part of the Institute that talk about the Twitter handle, being like, oh yeah, that's a great Twitter follow, and they always post really fun content. Mm-hmm. And I think that does work that goes far beyond just the building of the Institute. And that also, that's just positive. Yeah, it's all positive, and just gives people an impression of oh, this is fun, and this makes research interesting, and it also is like a window into some of the nerdier work that's happening there, but being translated in a way that's engaging to people that aren't just nerds. Mm-hmm. That stuff, I think, plays an important role, and that's something that we're also, we're taking that as something that has value for what's happening here at the Oral History Center at Berkeley. We're trying to build more of a web presence for ourselves in Twitter and newsletters that we send out more regularly to whoever subscribes to our stuff, and more regular podcasts. So that public engagement piece is something that I think this institution I'm a part of now values as being meaningful for the longer term health of our work. Yeah. And so that's something that I think. Cool. Yeah, is part of discussions that are happening here that were also what I remember experiencing in Philadelphia.
I have one last question, which is a little bit on a slightly different tack, but have you ever shared your research with scientific communities or scientist audiences?
I've had people that were scientists that came to my talks before. So, yeah, so there was, so the answer is yes.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of it.